Welcome everyone to the session, How to Make Social Enterprise Support System and Social Finance More Inclusion. I am Sara Seganti, Senior Manager at EVPA for Training, and I'm happy to have today with me three very experienced speakers to discuss about this topic. So welcome to Guy Lejeune, Senior Expert at DG Employment from the European Commission, Sabina Lobato, Director of Training, Employment and Operations at ONCE Foundation and Director General at Inserta, ONCE Foundation's employment services based in Spain, and Markus Freiburg, founder and CEO of FASE, financing agency for social entrepreneurship based in Germany. The session is promoted within the LIAISE, Linking Incubation Actors for Inclusive and Social Entrepreneurship project, now renamed as Better Incubation Project, more easy to remember, that is supported by the European Commission and is run by EBN together with Impact Hub and EVPA. The Better Incubation Project aims to foster the capacity of the business support organization to support social and inclusive entrepreneurship and to foster their connection with social finance. For those in the room that are not familiar with EU definitions, I would like to just make things clear. So when we speak about social entrepreneurship, we have in mind organizations that operate with the final aim of generating a social and or environmental impact. And when we speak about inclusive entrepreneurship, we have in mind those type of businesses that are run by a person coming from a vulnerable group or a disadvantaged background. So for the sake of this session, when we will refer to inclusive entrepreneurship, we will always have in mind enterprises that have a positive social mission. Before giving the floor to the speakers, I would like to set a few housekeeping rules. So feel free to use the chat, please, to introduce yourself, ask questions to the speakers. I'll take care of moderating the questions after the introduction. We are also happy to give you the broadcasting permission to speak, so you can request that and you can comment live and actually ask questions or just share experiences. We would like to make that session as interactive as possible, so please don't be shy and interact with us during the session. We will start with a very brief round of introduction, and I will give the floor first of all to Guy Lejeune so that he can tell us who is representing today.
Yeah, for me, it's in fact, I checked it, it's the third time this year that I'm asked to speak about inclusive and social entrepreneurship, because these seem to be two separate worlds, but they are not, there are big overlaps. So I work now on social entrepreneurship, social economy in DG Employment of the European Commission. And in previous years, I used to work on inclusive entrepreneurship, and I'm still back up for that file. So I'm the guy you should have for this overview.
Thank you very much, Guy. Sabina Lobato from ONCE Foundation.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I'm Sabina Lobato and come from the ONCE Foundation. I've been engaged in employment programs for persons with disabilities in the year 2010, and in the entrepreneurship program since then also. I'm a background, I'm an economist here in Spain, and I'm also like very interested in all the things that have to do with statistics and data that can prove the impact and the really the advance in the inclusion of persons with disabilities in the field of employment. So I collaborate very closely with the statistics public statistics office here in Spain. And that's it. I like to promote new projects and innovate also, and we are very keen also now in all the things that have to do with digital skills and technological professions, and the opportunity for persons with disabilities to access to that world.
Thank you very much, Sabrina. Yes, I think you developed such an interesting experience in the inclusion of people with disabilities. So we are really glad to have you here with us to discuss about this topic. And Markus Freiburg, an old EVPA member that we are very happy to have here today. So you can share a little bit of the perspective on social finance, but now just a 1-minute introduction on FASE and yourself.
Yes, thanks a lot, Sarah, for the kind introduction. Good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. My name is Markus Freiburg, co-founder and managing director of FASE, Financing Agency for Social Entrepreneurship, that we have set up together with Ashoka to support social enterprises and other impact ventures in raising hybrid growth capital from impact investors across Europe. And it's really a focus on hybrid finance, so combining different financial instruments on a deal-by-deal basis to support social entrepreneurs in their scaling. And so far, we managed to close more than 65 financing rounds and raising more than 40 million euros from European impact investors. And as Sarah indicated, also last year initiated the European Social Innovation and Impact Fund, which is the first fund across Europe that is providing patient capital to social enterprises and simultaneously also benefiting from guarantees from the European Commission from the EASY program. And yeah, really looking forward to our session today.
Thank you very much. I would leave the floor to Guy now for a short introduction on the Better Incubation project and on the rationale behind this project. And also, Guy, if you can give us a little bit of a more broader perspective, considering that you are one of the persons involved into writing the EU Action Plan for Social Economy. So you might give us a little bit of a general perspective on this.
Yeah, so there is this action plan for the social economy normally coming out in about a month's time. And the thing is, yeah, where to start? The fact is that inclusive and social entrepreneurship, we put them together in our unit. Our unit is since mid of this year also renamed into social and inclusive entrepreneurship. But the two worlds are very different because social entrepreneurship and social economy, there's a lot of stakeholders, there's a lot of meetings, there's even a commission expert group. So it's very different and there's a lot of voices. And we have seen that also in the consultation because this whole action plan started with a so-called consultation on the roadmap. So you had a quite short document explaining why we do this action plan, and also the history and so on. And then people could give their opinions, and we had quite a big number of opinions there. And so you have this whole structured approach, while inclusive entrepreneurship is something very different. In a way, the wording inclusive entrepreneurship, like stimulating underrepresented groups to become entrepreneur or to continue to be entrepreneur, is something that we do. We have this cooperation with the OECD, but the expression inclusive entrepreneurship is not that widespread. But what we did is we have it in the same unit. We also have it so there's an agreement with the OECD for cooperation on knowledge building. And one of the outcomes there is this Better Entrepreneurship policy tool, which is intended for policymakers to improve these two specific entrepreneurship policies. And there's case studies, there's a self-assessment they can take from which they find then out what are their weak and strong points. And you see there, of course, the similarities between the two types of entrepreneurship. And the big overlap is, of course, that social entrepreneurs are also often from these underrepresented groups. And also that these underrepresented groups often are interested also in social impact. And this explains also where the Better Incubation project comes from. It's in fact one of the main findings of our work with the OECD is that if, for example, a government wants to promote entrepreneurship and has a budget for that, the worst thing they can do is simply to hand it out in small amounts to a lot of beneficiaries. In fact, what we see is that what works in terms of support is a combination of financial and non-financial support. And the fact is that in the social entrepreneurship side, in all the structured dialogues and so on, colleagues, I was not yet working there, but the colleagues said that, look, stakeholders often come up with this issue. Look, it's nice that you have the EASY program with financial support, but it's not sufficient. We also need the non-financial support. And so from the inclusive and from the social side, we got that same message that we should try to do something on this non-financial support. We have technical assistance on the EASY and so on, but we wanted to do something, a real project focused purely on this. And that's where came then the idea to launch a call for proposals to have an EU-wide action for a pilot project in a way for 2 years, this year and next year, to support mainstream incubators to also pay attention to the specifics of this inclusive and social entrepreneurship. So that's where it all comes from. So we are almost halfway. I think we will have an halfway report, an interim report early next year. And of course, the whole push for entrepreneurship, I haven't said that, the whole idea of supporting entrepreneurship for DG employment, these two specific sorts are very important, because in the case of inclusive entrepreneurship, it's this whole idea, it's a sort of active labor market policy. If some people do not fit in working for a boss, so for them, entrepreneurship could be a good way out. There are other reasons why people may be better off in self-employment entrepreneurship than in a normal job. So that you have this whole labor market aspect. And then, of course, in social entrepreneurship, social economy, you have this whole issue of this positive social impact with the link to sustainability. There is also the important thing that the overall Commission drive now is that the overarching policy is European Green Deal with the link to sustainability. It's easy to see the link between sustainability and doing business differently, not for profit, but for social impact. And there's also the links to the so-called twin transitions and the green and the digital, where social economy, social entrepreneurship is very well placed. And so we had the big financial support program, the Next Generation, where one of the most important parts is this recovery and resilience facility. And for that, member states had to come up with a recovery and resilience program, resilience, one has to say. And there's quite a number of countries that have social economy in there. We are often asked this question, how many countries have social economy in their RRPs, as they are called? And it's a difficult question to answer, because most of these RRPs, they are public now. You can consult them. Some of them are really books. So yeah, you will find social economy in there, but to really say where it's significant, there's a couple of countries where you can say that, like in the case of Spain and Poland and France and Romania, but for the rest, there's a whole gray zone of countries that have some element of social economy, but not very significant. Belgium, my own country, is a very nice example in that. In this RRP, you have a federal part, and then you have the 3 regions that have that thing. And so, yeah, of course, you find social economy in there, but to assess how much it is of the overall RRP, I think I have to stick to 10 minutes, no?
Yes. I think it was a very nice introduction. Thank you very much. We see, we all work in the field, so we see the importance of social economy for the green and digital transition, and we're really happy to see the relevance that is given by the European Commission to the sector. I would now leave the floor to Sabina, so we can dig a little bit more into a practical example of inclusion. it's a European best practice. I think it's really relevant that Sabina is involved into the Better Incubation project. So Sabina will share her learnings with the community of practice that is working on defining which are really the barriers that are faced by people with disabilities and how to actually really advise on better defining programs meant to support these entrepreneurship ambitions. So Sabina, please, I know you have such an extensive experience and many programs that you have developed in the past, so 10 minutes are not enough for this, but I will ask you just a brief overview, and then I'm sure that there will be questions from the audience, and also I would invite people to contribute, as we might have in the audience organizations that have the experience in inclusion of other vulnerable categories, and this would be an interesting conversation to have altogether.
Okay, I will try to keep to this 10 minutes introduction. So just to put the program a little bit in context, I have to say that persons with disabilities in Spain represent 6.2% of the working age population, and only 1 in 4 persons are employed. One of the main problems is the low activity rate, which is common in other countries. Only 34.5% is the activity rate. In terms of statistics dealing with entrepreneurship specifically, 10.4% of persons employed with disabilities are entrepreneurs. This is 4 points less than the general population. And a relevant thing is that 27% are employers. So they generate new employments for persons, as we will see, mainly for persons with disabilities. In terms of gender, only 36% of the entrepreneurs are women. And our program has the mission to contribute to the full social inclusion of persons with disabilities. And the priority of the ONCE Foundation is employment. So we have to allocate 70% of our budget to employment programs. We've been promoting entrepreneurship since 1988. And we support entrepreneurs through the whole entrepreneurship process. So we have employment services all over the country, and we have orientation persons that the first thing is to do a personal interview with a person with disability unemployed. And in this interview, they detect the ambition or the interest in in being an entrepreneur, and also the profile and the moment, the point in the process that the person is. So this orientator then assigns the person to a specialized coach that has to do with the entrepreneur program, and together they define an itinerary for the person that includes training, also training in terms of creativity and going towards the definition of a business plan. So the support and guidance to generate and develop the idea is very important. And we have also financial support. So we have a grant program, an open grant call, and also some measures that go beyond startup the business from the different entrepreneurs. The monitoring and counseling after the startup is really important. We have also we've been also promoting training courses to strengthen the skills of entrepreneurs, mainly in marketing, in finance, and also in the past year also trainings that have to do with digital transformation of the businesses that have been very well welcomed by entrepreneurs. And another complementary activities are in the field of agreements with other organizations. For instance, we have a financial agreement with the main bank in Spain to provide with microcredits. Also, we have agreements with business organizations, and we sponsor, for instance, a prize with the main economic magazine in Spain that awards the best each year the best entrepreneur with disability, together with other categories of prizes. So we will be giving this prize next week. So it will be very, very interesting. In terms of the grants, we provide with a minimum grant of 3,000 euros, non-repayable. And this amount could be increased depending on social and labor situation of the person. Also, depending on if the project promotes other employment for persons with disabilities, and also if the initiative is in the area of green activities, also in the field of health and care, and also if the business has a digital base, both if it's a digital product or is a service that is provided mainly through platforms or websites, etc. So the average cost of the program per year, not taking into account the grants, is 300,000 euros. Sorry, and the average grants that we allocate per year, we tend to be around 100 grants per year, with an average amount now of 6,000 euros per participant. But in the past 3-4 years, not taking into account 2020, we are more in 70 participants. So this is a challenge that we have to really have a more strong communication program, because we feel that we don't reach all the entrepreneurs that can benefit from these grants. The entrepreneur profile is 64% male, as I said, is the average. More than 50% have over 40 years old, and more than 50% also have physical disabilities, and 20% have sensory disabilities. Mainly, 32% have only compulsory education, and 38% have higher education, but not university. University entrepreneurs with an university education, it's only 20%. 38 have been more than 1 year in unemployment, and 70% are from urban areas. So this is also a challenge to develop programs more in the rural areas. We have all types of activities. A high percentage is in the field of retail, but we've seen in the past year outstanding evolution with more diverse projects and higher level of specialization, and even with entrepreneurs that have a focus on social impact. We will be launching a website before the end of the year with public contents, and also with a member area where we will offer a business plan tool and training resources, guides, and also to generate a community and collaboration space between entrepreneurs and the ecosystem, with our coaches and facilitators, and even with voluntary people that can collaborate with the program. Around 5,000 persons with disabilities have been supported through this program in the last 10 years. And we've supported 1,800 projects financing through the grant program since 1988, with more than 15.8 million euros that have been co-financed by the ESF as I said, since 2000. The evolution of the entrepreneurship initiatives have been very outstanding, and digital-based businesses and even social entrepreneurs are more and more important in our program. We've seen that increase of the survival rate of startups when an entrepreneur has participated in the whole program. Some years ago, we promoted a study, a research that said that 80% of businesses survive more than 3 years, which is much more than the general statistics. And there is very important the multiplying effects of the program in terms of generation of other employment for persons with disabilities. We need to, as a challenge, I want to highlight that we need to develop more focused activities to increase entrepreneurship among persons with more complex disabilities. So we are going to start a project called MCA, that is supported entrepreneurship in line with supported employment methodology. And I want also to say, just to finalize, that we have since 2-3 years ago an incubator for social entrepreneurship initiatives, not necessarily promoted by persons with disabilities. And in this incubator, we provide validation of products and businesses, orientation for companies with a vendable product, or also for research projects with a validated prototype, and both in a relevant field to improve any aspect of life for persons with disabilities. That could be mobility, education, health, etc. And that's it all for my part. Sarah?
Thank you very much. I didn't know about this incubator, actually, to support entrepreneurial ideas to improve the life of people with disabilities. So you take it from all the angles, not only to support people with disabilities into the workforce. This is very interesting, Sabina. We will discuss this later on. Now let's give the floor to Marcus for a brief overview on access to finance.
Yes, thanks a lot, Sarah, for the kind invitation. And within the next 10 minutes, I want to give you a brief overview of what we are doing. I start with a brief comment on inclusive and social entrepreneurship, and talk about the challenges that we see of social enterprises in financing, elaborate briefly how we support those social enterprises, share a specific example that also shows the power of hybrid finance, and then end up with briefly outlining the structure of our co-investment fund, ESIF. So maybe starting with, we are focusing on social entrepreneurship, but what we see is that many challenges that social enterprises face in the market, and I will come to that in a second, are very similar to the challenges that we also see for inclusive entrepreneurs. So I would argue that the remedies that we have jointly developed as ecosystem for social entrepreneurs can also be used to support inclusive entrepreneurship going forward. But keep in mind that we as FASE are especially focused on social entrepreneurship. So that was the first point. Regarding the second point, I think we mainly see two challenges when it comes to access to finance for social enterprises in the market. So the first challenge is that we see that many social enterprises operate hybrid business models. So it's basically they combine for-profit and not-for-profit elements in an integrated model. But unfortunately, this is faced with a dichotomous logic of funders in the market, because they seem to be either focused on a philanthropic mindset, so giving money away for impact, or they seem to be focused on an investment logic that is looking for market rates of return and also very exit oriented. And we see that many social enterprises don't fit in these, let's say, dichotomous models, and really need a more customized support. And the second challenge that we are seeing is that many impact investors are actually waiting at the end of the pipeline. So each and everybody wants to invest in enterprises that are around for 5 years, that have 1 million plus revenues, and that are ideally cash positive. But the challenge is, in our view, that we really need patient impact investors and investors for impact that are willing to invest in early stages of the pipeline to really invest in those enterprises and support them also non-financially to bring them to the level that it's also, let's say, applicable for mainstream, more mainstream finance. And that is exactly what we are trying to do with FASE. So together with Ashoka in Germany in 2013, we have set up FASE basically as a corporate finance advisor that supports social enterprises and other impact startups in raising hybrid growth capital from European impact investors. And we really support them over the whole funding cycle. So usually starting with an initial review of the business model and the impact model, then also structuring the deal, often combining equity and mezzanine elements, also blending in grant elements where appropriate, and then reaching out to a network of currently more than 1,500 impact investors across Europe to really build syndications on a deal-by-deal basis. So that can be then coalitions between social business angels, family offices, foundations, social venture funds, or public co-investment schemes, where we really try to identify a coalition that can support the further growth of a social enterprises best, both financially and non-financially, and then also help to finalize the transaction, help to set up the term sheet and negotiate the deal. And that so far we have done in more than 65 cases successfully, raising more than 40 million euros from European impact investors. And I think the interesting thing is that this includes a closed transaction in 7 member states of the European Union. So Germany, Austria, Netherlands, Belgium, Poland, Hungary, and Sweden. So really trying to contribute towards an open pan-European pipeline of investment-ready social enterprises. And I think the ultimate vision that we want to contribute is really to contribute to building a single European market of social innovation. So I think that is also what the EVPA is working against. And we hope that we can contribute to that. And maybe just giving you one specific example of a social enterprise, a German one that is called Social B, Ashoka Fellow Sarabun. There's also a nice case study from the EVPA and FASE available on our website. And it's a temporary employment agency that is basically helping to integrate migrants into the labor market and society in Germany. And obviously, when the migration crisis hit Germany in 2015, the challenge was also to integrate those persons into the labor market. And often it's also there is some, let's say, level of cautiousness or reluctance in terms of enterprises to employ those persons. And Social B was set up as a not-for-profit entity that basically then tried to integrate these people into the labor market and basically act as a temporary employment agency that takes up all the bureaucratic work and then basically rent these persons to employers to have a low-level entry barrier, and then always with a target to move them into qualified jobs or in vocational trainings and afterwards. And I think it's also an interesting model that operated within this not-for-profit structure. Nevertheless, it was also set up as a business entity, which also then obtained fee incomes from the enterprises that basically employed those migrants. And I think the interesting point is that if you look at from a financing strategy, that there was also a combination of grants and impact investing included. So on the one hand side, one German foundation supported the setup and the development of Social B with a grant. And on the other side,
we have lost Marcus. So I guess he would be joining again. I will continue with, I see there are no questions in the chat, so I would encourage our participants to drop in the questions, but I will continue with the consideration and, oh, Marcus, you're back.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened. I was just kicked out of the system.
Yes. We can hear you well. Yes, go ahead.
Just to continue with the example. So it was a combination also with an impact investor that provides patient growth capital, and we used mezzanine finance for that. And we see that mezzanine financing can be especially useful for social enterprises and inclusive businesses, especially because it's provide patient growth capital that can also then paid back via the cash flows of the company and doesn't need an exit event. because so that means, for example, a sale to a strategic investor or an initial public offering, because we see that for many social enterprises, this is not let's say an interesting exit route. So mezzanine can be very interesting. And I think overall we had to raise, I think it was around 500K for Social B. And I think it's also an interesting example at the somehow it's the intersection between social entrepreneurship and inclusive entrepreneurship. And maybe concluding then, just from the initial works that we have done with the initial cases, we also initiated the European Social Innovation and Impact Fund last year, which is basically the first intermediary across Europe that is providing patient mezzanine capital to social enterprises and simultaneously benefiting from guarantees from the European Commission under EASY. And it's a 20 million matching facility that can invest up to 500K in mezzanine capital in social enterprises, always together with experienced direct investors. And the key feature of the fund is that from this 20 million, from the first 4 million that would default, 80% are covered by the European Commission via the EASY program. So with a maximum contribution of 3.2 million. And that obviously allows the fund to be more patient than other investors could be in the market and really finance social enterprises that would otherwise not have access to finance. And currently we are still completing the fundraising. So currently at 11 million, but we have already done the first 9 investments. And we have also, let's say, I think invested in 5 member states of the European Union. So I think the ESIF is an interesting example on how to, let's say, build investment structures for social and inclusive entrepreneurs. I think it also shows how you can, how you need to use different financial instruments to financial mechanism to make this work. In this case, the combination of patient impact investors together with guarantees from the European Union. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Marcus. I will take a couple of questions from the audience. There is a question from Stefano Wolf for Marcus, who asks, how do you rate the potential for-profit social enterprises? So are there sufficient target companies out there with qualified teams and viable business models?
So if I understand correctly, so in terms of the definition, we follow the definition of the European Commission regarding social enterprises that see them regardless of the let's say legal status. So it can be for-profit or not-for-profit entities. And we really focus on the measurable social impact that these enterprises want to generate, usually towards the sustainable development goals. And it's usually then implemented that there is a theory of change and an impact model, often implemented along the lines of an IOE model, so input, outcome, output, outcome, impact, and then measured with specific, let's say, KPIs. And we see that there's indeed a growing awareness for these, let's say, enterprise models. And we basically see it feeding up from 2, let's say, fields. On the one hand side, classical NGOs that are building up business models. And on the other side, also classical entrepreneurs, for-profit business entrepreneurs that are trying to set up impact ventures. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. I will build on that answer to ask a question to Sabina and Guy on impact measurement and management. This is one of the key practices that we have identified as relevant to engage with social investors. And we have been discussing about non-financial support and how this is relevant, especially in this social and inclusive entrepreneurship field. So I wanted to ask to Sabina and to Guy if you have identified this as well as one of the key elements to actually build capacity building on with social and inclusive entrepreneurs to make sure they have the clear vision of the impact of the business. And so they will actually have many more opportunities to connect with social finance that has this strong vision on impact.
Yes, I can start if you want. Yes, as I said, for us is really a challenge to go beyond the grants because we find that many entrepreneurs need support in terms of coaching during the whole process, but also in terms of having skills and competences that they don't have previous to the idea of becoming entrepreneurs. So I think I don't have the exact percentage, but still think that it's still between 20 and 40% of our entrepreneurs find this idea of becoming entrepreneurs as the last and unique way of being employed. So they don't have a background. They sometimes don't have they are not vocational entrepreneurs. So for those entrepreneurs, it's really, really important to have this continuity in the support. And for us, it's really a challenge because we've been many years more in the pre-entrepreneur support and the grant program, and not so focused on the support after the startup of the business.
Thank you. This resonates with many conversations we had with EBN members, so mainstream incubators, accelerators that often report of entrepreneurs that don't acknowledge to be impact entrepreneurs. And this happens, I think, a lot also with inclusive entrepreneurs, that sometimes this is something that you need to learn. This is why the importance of the capacity building. Guy, do you have an opinion on this impact measurement practice and relevance for the sector?
Yeah, for social entrepreneurship, it's a very well-known thing, and normally it will also be part of the action plan. But for inclusive, no, because we started from seeing these two types of entrepreneurship as separate ones. But in reality, you can have overlap, and then that bridge is a bit missing, I have to admit. So, yeah.
This is an interesting conversation, and we have questions from the speakers, complex questions. I don't know if we have all the answers for you, but we're happy to discuss this with you. So two questions on these distinctions, overlaps, and differences between social and inclusive entrepreneurship. So maybe the first one we can tackle it before. What does social entrepreneurship have to learn from inclusive entrepreneurship? And this I would also translate it to social finance, because I have had quite some discussions with EVPA members recently, so capital providers impact-oriented, that were fascinated by the discussion on inclusion. As you know, and also as what Marcus was relating, is that investors for impact didn't have much choice on their investment opportunities up to today, but now the market is growing and there is more and more opportunities for investments. This so opens a possibility to start reflecting on inclusion also on the social finance perspective, when to choose for incubees, investees. And this is, I know, a complicated question, because social finance has not been reflecting really on the inclusion dimension. But if you have any comment on this, or if you think social finance or social entrepreneurship can learn something from the experience of inclusive entrepreneurship, it's the moment to share it.
No, happy to give it a try, and maybe start with a comment on the definition. So I think that it's just social entrepreneurship and inclusive entrepreneurship offer different lenses on similar and related phenomena. Also, there are differences in the detail. So while from our understanding, social entrepreneurship is really, let's say, focusing on the let's say a direct measurable societal impact with the products and services that they are let's say producing. Inclusive entrepreneurship is more focused on let's say supporting entrepreneurship with disadvantaged groups, regardless of where the business models lay. So it can be that an inclusive entrepreneur is also a social entrepreneur, but it can also be that they are active in other fields. And generally, I would say that there is, in terms of the motivation and the social orientation, there's definitely an overlap. And I think it helps us to broaden the relevance and to increase the relevance of both phenomena, because I think, at least from the social entrepreneurship field, I still sometimes feel that we are still, let's say, lagging behind in the relevant questions. So when we are, for example, discussing with the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs in Germany about specific programs for social enterprises, we always hear that it's still only a niche phenomenon and not a mainstream project, and it's also used as an argument to not do anything. So I think building alliances, I think, would be very helpful. And I think the second point is that I also see that the structural challenges are very similar between both phenomena, especially what I was referring to with this early stage financing gap, or called death valley or missing middle, that I think is very similar. And it could also be a motivation from a public side to build, let's say, joint support structures that can be used both by social enterprises and the inclusive entrepreneurs.
Thank you very much, Marcus. And Sabina, from your practical experience, when you relate that you have an incubator that funds entrepreneurial idea to support the life of people with disabilities, what is the motivation behind those entrepreneurs? They are just seeking profit, or is there behind them they have another story of why they're working to improve the life of people with disability?
Okay, I'm not engaged in the incubator program, but as far as I know, they have, in general, they have a personal experience with disabilities. So, for instance, there is a mother that is, I think she's an engineer, and she develops an how do you say this? Exo bone that to promote movement for cerebral palsy because of her children, of her child, or for instance, entrepreneurs that have to do with mobility issues. So they develop things that an application that have to do with public transport and how to make this public transport accessible for all type of disabilities, information. So in general terms, there is a personal background on the experience of disability. And what I wanted also to highlight in regards with your question is that our learning on this inclusion program through entrepreneurship is that investing in inclusion produces more inclusion, not only the evident inclusion. So, for instance, I can provide with the example of a group of 3 entrepreneurs with disabilities from the region of Valencia in Spain that have a business in the is a website, a marketplace for shoes, very casual shoes, and they are growing a lot in past 2 years, and they decided to contract new persons. So these persons are persons with disabilities, and also they launched campaigns that return the benefits to the entrepreneurship program of the ONCE Foundation. So this was like amazing when they decided to do this idea. And also I wanted to share with you that because we are co-financed by the European Social Fund, sometimes there are measures or rules that have to do to provide equal treatment to all entrepreneurs. So we, for instance, some years ago, we had to change the way we allocate the grants in terms of being, as I explained, a minimum grant for everybody, and then to increase this depending on objective aspects of the entrepreneurship. And this I think it's not the more efficient way to support entrepreneurs, because you find then that there could be initiatives that could need, for instance, 1,000 euros to start because it's a professional or someone that wants to deliver services through the website. And sometimes you have entrepreneurs that need a really a big investment. So you need to try to give the higher amount of the grant. And so I think we have not did the comparative research, but we experience that that the life of the businesses have decreased a little since we had to implement this change in the way of allocating grants. So I should reflect that it's important to be as much custom oriented and really have a support that goes to the needs of the entrepreneur. So then mainstream or common measures don't provoke the more impact that you can provoke.
Thank you very much, Sabina. This is a relevant consideration. I think it has been mentioned by all of you while discussing about the Social B program. Also, Marcus, the way that you engage with social entrepreneurs, the relevance of customization and really tailoring the support to the needs of the social enterprise, I think applies the same to inclusive entrepreneurs. This is a very relevant topic for this impact approach, and this is why also probably programs tend to be a little bit more expensive. So the support that you need to ensure that these businesses are successful needs to be probably a little bit more intense. I have, I think, a final question for you because we are near the closing of the session, but on the success rate of this type of entrepreneurs. So for me, I work in the social sector since many years. I've been discussing this a lot in my career about social entrepreneurs, and I think also inclusive entrepreneurs being more successful than the average companies. So startups in the social sector tend to have a better survival rate. But there are no really researches on this. When I try to discuss with organizations that collect data on this, usually national governments and countries don't have data specifically to target social entrepreneurship on this. So we all have different categorization, as Guy was mentioning at the beginning. This is a huge challenge in terms of data collection for all countries and the European Commission as well, I guess. But I'm wondering if, starting from just your experience, Sabina, Marcus, and Guy, you have the same impression, like what Sabina was referring about the entrepreneurship program have quite a higher survival rate, and where this belongs to. So what are the main reasons behind this?
I think this is a very interesting question and happy to start. So obviously I don't have any broad, let's say, empirical data, but at least anecdotal evidence, and also I think some insights from funds that we are working with. And I would agree that also what we're hearing, maybe the let's say default rate of social enterprises might be somewhere around 10 to 20% in the market. And I think that might be lower for two reasons. On the one hand side, I think that are very relevant, let's say, challenges that these entrepreneurs are tackling. And so from an economic perspective, you can say, take it for granted that the market that these enterprises are serving is given, unfortunately, because there are so many challenges. I think that would be one argument. And the other argument from my side would be that also these entrepreneurs are often extremely motivated because they're coming from, let's say, similar backgrounds, so that the intrinsic motivation might be higher. So that I think is beneficial. On the other side, I would also add a note of cautiousness, because obviously survival is only one dimension of success. And we see that especially local models can survive and, let's say, reach a certain target population. On the other hand, I think it's also fair to say that we still have an scale-up challenge with social enterprises. There are also not so many examples that really made it to a global or European or even national model. From an Ashoka perspective, we would always quote people like Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia, for example, that I think everybody's using on a regular basis. But if you think about it from that perspective, I think there's also still a lot of upside potential
to support the further scale up of social enterprises.
Thank you. A final comment from Guy? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to echo Marcus' comments because, in fact, as I said, I worked so long on inclusive entrepreneurship, and there an important distinction is between opportunity entrepreneurs and necessity entrepreneurs. So necessity entrepreneurs, a nice example is that at the height of the financial crisis, youth entrepreneurship rates in the countries the most affected, like Greece and Spain and Portugal, and the question is how to interpret that. You could see it as a very good point. They are very entrepreneurial, but unfortunately, it's a lot of necessity entrepreneurship. Young people didn't find a job and they started something to survive. And then there is not necessarily much preparation and much knowledge about how to run a business. And then, the survival rates of this necessity entrepreneurs is not that high. While for opportunity entrepreneurs, they see a business case, like typically in sustainable economy, in social economy, they see a business case, they take their time to prepare and find the right support, and that explains it, I think.
Thank you very much. We have only a few minutes left. So Sabina, your final remark on this, if you have an idea of the reasons behind this high success rate that you actually verified in your program.
I agree very much with appreciation from Guy. In fact, when we did this study some years ago, we found that the main cause of the closing of the initiatives were economic causes. So this goes much in line with the lack of preparation and the lack of skills in terms of managing a business. But on the other side, when you ask the entrepreneurs which are the factors that must influence the success of the initiative, is the first one is that there is a business opportunity. So something that is new, a new geographical area that has no service, etc. And the second more important success factor is the I think in English is grit. So they keep going and they insist in those cases where there is a necessity, as Guy said, there is more important.
Thank you very much. I really hope we will continue these conversations together within the Better Incubation framework. So I'm copying here the website for all those that would like to participate in this conversation. Please reach out to us. We'll be happy to include you into the project. Now I will return you to the lobby where you can continue with the program. So the next session starts at 1. Don't miss them because they are really engaging. We made our best as EVPA team to build engaging sessions. And I really would like to thank you, the speakers today that were so nice as to engage in this open conversation on social and inclusive entrepreneurship. Hope to have many others in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you, Guy, Sabine, and Marcus. It was nice to have you discussing together today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.